an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Travelers, Season 1, Episode 5, Room 101. In this episode, almost the entire team gets abducted after a pretty brutal fucking car accident, I may add. And they are subjected to some questioning. I use quotes around that. Without a firm idea of what exactly the folks who are doing this to them are after. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. First of all, thank you so much to Karyn for commissioning this episode. I didn't, normally when there's a series that somebody has commissioned several episodes of, I get used to seeing their name on my calendar. For some reason, my Google Calendar does not say Travelers and, Dark and whatever. It says each commissioner's name instead, which is a little annoying. So I'll look really quickly and I'll see a name that's familiar and I'll be like, oh, okay, they probably ordered this episode or that episode. And so when I looked at Karyn's name, I wasn't really sure. And I was delighted to see that she had commissioned a Travelers episode because up until this point, I feel like it's been mostly Michael, if I'm not mistaken, who's been commissioning those. So it was a really, really nice surprise because I had been dying to cover the next one and I had made myself wait on watching it because there's a lot of moving parts to this show. So yeah, I'm super stoked to be here, guys. And this episode is really intense. It's really intense. I'm covering this after an also particularly intense episode of Dark, which I just finished, and this has just been a hell of a day. Okay, so Travelers, Season 1, Episode 5. This episode, guys, it starts off with basically our entire team is about to welcome 4 new travelers. Guys, this opening scene, I swear to God, it makes sense how disturbing a lot of these openings are when you're inviting new travelers onto our planet, that a lot of the ways that people die are disturbing and upsetting. And so it just follows that we're going to see a lot of this sort of thing. But this particular instance was so deeply upsetting to watch unfold that I had to take a minute. I really did. So what's happening here is that there is a family in the car, what I think is a brother and a sister, a mother and a father. And the girl in the back seat is screaming at her father to stop. Her brother, I should add, is sort of just holding on and has, I won't say a totally expressionless face, but he seems to be letting his sister do the begging for him. Like he's not going to be part of that. And she's screaming at her father to stop. Her mother is also holding on and crying. And her father is obviously unstable and is about to do something really horrifying. And they're all suddenly overcome with pain. And you realize that every single one of them was meant to die. And I should say it looks like all of them, but we find out it's not quite. Because the father screeches to a halt just before the car apparently sails off an overhang. It's like they're in a parking garage and he was going up this twisty sort of, and he was going to fly off the top of the parking garage. And I guess probably also injure a bunch of innocent people who might be standing below on the sidewalk. So, wow, you're a total asshole. The number of dudes that feel the need to kill their entire family and themselves is so gross. You know what, you douchebag? Just fucking kill yourself. Just take yourself out of the equation. Apparently, they would all be better off if you were planning to do this. You do not have the right. Get the fuck out. I'm so over it. The number of stories that I have seen. Man shoots wife, shoots child, shoots himself, or shoots wife and shoots himself and leaves child fucking abandoned is really, really disgusting. So I'm going to leave that there because if I keep talking about it, I'm going to get more agitated. So he screeches to a halt and they open the doors and the daughter is sitting in the back looking completely puzzled. And our team is there waiting. McClaren is like, all right, what's up? I'm traveler such and such. And they each give their numbers. Mother gives the number. Brother gives the number. And the daughter is mystified and sits there and says, what's happening? And Carly, guys, I'm never going to get the two of their names right. I'm never going to do it. Is it Marcy? Is it Carly? She's Carly, right? Says Misfire. And what this is, and apparently this is not unheard of. Like they know what this means when she says it. But apparently what could have happened here is that the angle of the way that they were twisting and turning and the way that the car stopped, they needed like the exact coordinates for the traveler who was meant to take over her body to get in there. And they maybe misjudged the angle a tiny bit and she was off and that person didn't make it. Now I am dying to know on my end what happens to the person who volunteered to take her body if this is off. Is their consciousness just like sort of out there floating around? Or is this like, when they fail to hit and get like sort of taken over, do they go back into their own body at their time? And I would like to say, I keep on bringing up the method in which this happens and the way things are on their end in terms of method and like the experience that the volunteers are going through. But I also am not totally sure that the people who are volunteering for this position are like going straight from their own brain into somebody else's. They could be downloaded as a consciousness into a third-party machine before they're sent on to a new body. And that, like, they're, even if they don't hit, they might not just have a body to bounce back into in the first place. I don't know how this works, but I really want to know what this looks like from the other end. So McClaren, like they immediately, I would like to really give them all props here. They immediately shift from talking like travelers to dealing with the fact that this girl doesn't know what's happening and that they have to pretend to be the people that they pretend to be. And that takes a lot of sort of flexibility and quick thinking and a change of attitude overall in a way that I would find difficult, I think, in the moment. And I admired how well they pulled this off. And McClaren immediately being like, I'm a policeman. My friends and I need to have a talk with your mom and dad and your brother about what just happened. And she's asking, why was he doing that? And she yells at her father, why would you do that? And it's awful because she has every right to scream that at her dad, but that isn't her dad anymore. And this poor dude that she's yelling at 100% agrees with her and is like, yeah, why would you do that? But, you know, he looks like what he looks like now. It's really awful. So McClaren says, you know, let us talk with your family. Everything will be all right. And they're talking about her grandmother be on her mother's side, and McClaren has to be like, on your side to the woman because she's acting like this is third person. She can't be doing that right now. And McClaren offers to take her to her grandmother's house. And she says, I want to go with my mom. And her mother instructs her to go with the man. We'll be back in a few days and we'll be a family again. Now, this is one of those situations in which if I were a traveler and I expected to be like this family and like all dying at once would have been an ideal situation for a group of travelers because they could all continue to function as a family on the outside while completely being themselves in their home with one another and not having to continue to put on a show with family members who they don't know. And now this girl not being aware of what's going on and not being a traveler throws a huge wrench in the expectation that they had coming here. And I, for one, would be so disappointed. I would be so heartbroken if I really was like, sweet, I'm going with a bunch of others and we're taking over this entire family. So all of us get to just like relax when we're at home and talk honestly about what's happening. And I can't help but think that this poor girl being on the outside, every member of her family now will be all seemingly on the same page with some mysterious shit that she isn't in on. This is going to mess with her head. There's just no way to avoid this. Like, everybody suddenly starts acting different compared to how they had been, except you. I feel really bad for this girl. She is in for a weird time of it, and I want her to like be told the truth. But there is literally no reason to do that. There is no way she would believe it. There's no reason to do it. So this whole thing is just awful to watch. It's awful. And I, again, admire their quick thinking with deciding to send her to her grandmother's. Like, yeah. So, at this point, because they're theorizing about what could have happened here. And Trevor is like, she could have been moving like inside the car. And he says, what is it that he says? He says something about how it was a tough tell, but it's like in the subtitles, it's done as an acronym, TELL. It's a tough TELL for the director to calculate. I'm not sure, like, I'm guessing time estimation, something, I have no idea. Agnes says maybe they'll ship her to her grandma's or something. Honestly, or sorry, Agnes. Agnes said that, and I'm like, hoping that's true because I cannot think of a better situation for her, but also it will seem to her as if her entire family doesn't want her. And I do not know what's worse, honestly, like, because it's not going to be as if they're sending her brother away. I guess they could tell her they've sent her brother away and she wouldn't be home to tell, but I don't know. Like, there's a number of ways they could do this, but it all is really dependent on how much they're able to keep from her and for how long, you know? Michael says they explain tells in a previous episode, don't they? If they do, I don't remember because I do record these pretty far apart. And I try and rewatch previous ones, but I didn't get to do that this time. I've seen the first episode now like 3 times. So apparently the girl that was supposed to come through, or I say girl, they were coming into the girl's body, was going to be their historian, which puts them in a really bad situation. And we find out later that evidently the consciousness of Philip has been altered so that he could be a historian. This is absolutely fascinating to me because I had been wondering how the hell he remembered everything and if it was just a ton of study, because you can make yourself memorize shit. If that's like all you need to do, you can sit down and you can make yourself do it. But you really do have to have a lot of confidence that this person's going to manage to maintain all of that throughout everything that you do with your missions and stuff. So it makes so much sense when we find out that he's been altered in some way. But yeah, he gives them some money and a piece of advice on somebody to bet on. Non-event horizon in the 4th. It's a horse race tomorrow. Look it up. So that's meant to sort of help them get through. That was going to be how they like fucking set up, and that's just not really going to do it. And they have to figure out an alternate now. And it's possible that the person that was supposed to meet them via this girl, if they are not simply lost to the ether, will come through on a different person. But if they don't have their historian, I'm not sure how they figure out who that is or where they go to get them or what. I'm not sure how much information they have on the other side in terms of being able to tell them, all right, so it didn't work the first time, but we know that they went to XYZ place. So when you go through, head there, that's where they're at. I mean, I guess if they're all came through except for the one, they can just assume they all went back to the same house that you would have been in. So just go to that house. But then you now have this other aspect of the additional person from the outside needing an excuse to be around all the time, to keep the cover from the daughter. And also we know that they like saw that the crew was off mission last episode, or the episode before that with the rescuing of the little Romanian boy. And, you know, eventually there was like a notification that came through on that little boy. Like, hey, you're off mission. What the fuck are you doing? So they are tracking shit somehow and keeping aware from somewhere of exactly how shit's going down. So just a lot of questions still, guys. A lot of questions. So they are talking about what the hell they're going to do with this kid. Explain mom and dad will be back after the mission, obviously, without mentioning the mission, which is in just over 48 hours, and you're down a team member. And this is evidently, because they're sending over a whole new crew, this is a pretty big fucking mission. This is a big deal. Like, it makes sense at one point or another when they start discussing who could have taken them, that it might just be in direct relation to keeping them from accomplishing this. Anya says tell is time, elevation, longitude, latitude. Thank you. So McClaren goes off to deal with that, and this is why the crew is split up. And I would assume that the people who had been who abduct them really intended to get all of them, but I don't know that for sure. They might have been aware of what was happening. I don't know. And there's a really interesting moment when they are talking about the misfire in the car as McClaren has gone off to do his own thing. And they are discussing the fact that this misfire happened. And Philip is entering something and says, okay, boss, it's done. Tip went out as of this morning. And Carly says, I wonder how many misfires there have been since we started this. And Trevor says the first wave was upwards of 30%. And fucking, I think Carly and Marcy are both like, wait, how much? Are you serious? Nobody told me that. And he asks them if they would still have volunteered if they knew. And they both don't immediately answer. Carly finally says probably. And I figure because he poses the question in this way, their consciousness must just be gone. This is essentially somebody died, is what I believe from the way that he, you know, he wouldn't be like, would you have even volunteered if it meant that you just go back into your own body and get resubmitted to somebody else? Like, that wouldn't be, you know, taken so seriously. And this is when, guys, I saw this coming. So Carly looks down and she says, I mean, if you think about it, what other choice did we? And she's pulling through, and this truck, I could tell from the angle of the camera when she starts saying, what other choice did we have? I was like, they're about to get in an accident. She took her eyes off the road, and this isn't her fault. These people went after them, but there is something about that moment that I feel like it's set up to make you think that it is an accident initially. And this fucking truck slams into the side of her car. Now, this is really one of the more intense car crashes that I've seen. Car crashes are one of those things that it's really easy with a lot of action movies to sort of like underestimate the effects of one. And occasionally you'll watch a movie in which it feels like they really get across how much that impact hits, how intense that is, and the overall like chaos and destruction of it. One of the most startling and upsetting car accidents I've ever seen on film was, I don't know how many of you guys have seen Adaptation, but there is a character in that, and he's missing his 2 front teeth, and we find out that he was in a really bad car accident. And that one is so, like, it's so upsetting when it happens. It really feels like you just experienced it yourself. And this one just, I like immediately knew when she turns and starts saying we didn't really have and I like looked down because I was like, oh fuck, they're about to get hit. And when I heard the slam, I was like, I like gasped out loud. It was really bad. Anya says, I was surprised they weren't injured more badly. Same. Like, that's a direct hit from a fucking Mack truck. That shit should have killed them. I don't really know why it didn't. I'm not sure I totally buy it. But we also don't hear about what their bodies are doing after this, other than the fact that they have saline drips and catheters. We don't know if there might be other injuries that they just aren't acknowledging or treating. Maybe they just don't need to worry about that. So they wake up and like you immediately see this is a serious fucking professional operation. They are each in a wheelchair. They are each locked in a separate cage made from just like chain link fence. They each have the IV drip to keep them hydrated, and they each have a catheter, so there's no reason to like I don't know what you do for defecation that takes care of urination. I don't know what else you do if it's just like, well, just sit in it. I don't know. And they are each like linked, like, what do you call it? Oh my God. Buckled, I guess. Buckled to, like, with these restraints to their wheelchairs. The floor is covered in about an inch of water. And this could be easily like, well, this is just like an abandoned building in bad shape. I tend to think that this is to conduct electricity. That if they wanted to do something to restrain them from leaving, that could be, I mean, they're sitting in a metal chair, you know, they are surrounded by metal cages. This could be another security precaution of some kind. But that's just where my mind went, and I have no idea if that's even true. And they all begin to wake up. Trevor's the first one, then Carly, and she is like out of it and starts to immediately flip the fuck out when she realizes that she's restrained. And finally, Trevor has to talk to her and be like, girl, I understand that this is your instinct to like fight, but you need to stop wasting your energy because you are not going to be able to get out of these restraints. Like, you look at the way they're being kept and how organized it is, and you know there's no escaping this situation unless the people in charge here decide that it shall be so. It's really terrifying. Like, I make it a point, I didn't read the summary of the episode before I watched it, because there's like a little blurb under the title on Netflix when you like go to a new episode. I really try hard not to read them because I like to not know at all what I'm getting into. And when they all start to wake up and I realize that they were like in prison somewhere, guys, this is like worse than a nightmare to me. This is like worst fear type shit, you know? And I think the fact that it is so professionally done is what made it so much worse for me. I've seen movies where people are kidnapped, but there's always an element of like the people who did the kidnapping aren't super organized, or there's a lot of like conflict within the crew that did it and you can exploit that, or they're not like airtight with the way that they've like locked down the building. There's always like a feeling of, why don't you do this? Or why don't you do that? And I'm watching this and I've got no ideas. I'm like, you just have to sit there and fucking wait. There's absolutely nothing to be done. And like Carly, she's in some pain from it. Once Marcy wakes up, it turns out that she's got a concussion, and we know that Marcy already has some sort of brain injury that has caused her to be like, you know, worried about maybe dying younger or having some sort of attack. So I was like, did this irritate that? Did this like make that worse? And later on, she does have an attack. So I don't know if that's just a result of the stress because of the situation that they put her in. I don't know if that was a result of the accident as well. I don't know, but I don't like that at all. And Philip takes the longest to wake up. He finally wakes up, but he doesn't wake up until he's in the other room, and he comes back and he's awake. He doesn't wake up while he's in the cage with all of them initially. And it should be noted, again, that there is an extra cage that's empty. So I believe they expected McClaren to be here, and shit did not go according to plan. So I don't know. They wind up all being sort of let go, I think. I don't really know how to explain how they're found, because at the end, McClaren is just given coordinates to go to pick them up, and they are all unconscious, but they are still alive. I can't imagine that what Carly did was all it took to get them to let them go. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I kind of wondered if it wasn't a trap because they had wanted to have McClaren in the first place and then they didn't get him. And maybe they were setting him up to be like, you know, to be gripped up. But it didn't really make sense because he winds up getting the tip via the web, and that's his work. So he has every excuse to bring backup and colleagues to this place if he wanted to do that. But yeah, so we're going to go back. So here comes, like, I've been saying that I love Trevor. I mean, how do you not? But this episode really, I mean, how do you not though? Like, he is just trying so hard to make a joke out of everything and keep things sort of lighthearted and humanize himself. And it is, I loved it. It felt so weirdly sincere. It didn't just feel like whistling in the dark. It is, for sure, that's what it is. But there was something behind it. Like, this is his element. There was a feeling to him of like, oh, we've been captured. I fucking know just how to deal with this situation. Like, nobody else seemed quite ready to face it. And he was the one who was practical and like, don't try and escape. You're wasting your energy. Don't do this. They're doing that. They're doing this. Like, there is just a real feeling throughout of this being fucking Trevor's territory in a way that it isn't for everybody else. And I was here for it. Like, his acting was so good in this. Michael just said Trevor forever. Amen. My guess is the guy behind the screen linked the camera footage so that McClaren's alert goes off. The guy behind the screen linked the camera footage so that McClaren's alert goes off. I'm not totally sure what you mean, Agnes. I'm not sure what that's in reference to me saying, but it doesn't, we'll get to that. So this is a lot of, like, first of all, their comms are cut out, and it's not until later on when McClaren tries to get in touch with them that he realizes he's not getting a response for everything. But let's see. Oh, Anya says how they're let go. Link the camera footage so that McClaren's alert goes off. Yeah, but that's not really what I'm hung up on. We'll get there. I'll talk about that later. but yeah, they don't know what this person wants, and they don't know who this person is. And there are some varying ideas of what it could be. It seems like what McClaren thinks initially. He finds out that there have been entire teams that have disappeared before. And he finds this out from the cop that he is not supposed to be having contact with again. But he goes to her anyway, and she's pissed. She does not want to see him. And he has to be like, I'm sorry, I know the protocols but fuck the protocols. I don't know where my whole fucking team went. And she's like, look, I don't know how to tell you this, but that happens. Like, I have been supposed to be about to do a mission, and the people just vanish into thin air. And I don't know whether or not this was like, you know, somebody catching on to what they were doing and like getting involved. I don't know if this was the director taking them out of the equation, because it could be that. But, you know, it's not an unheard of. She says, you need to consider the possibility they've been taken out of the equation by the director. And he says, I'm responsible for the team's actions, so why are they getting taken instead of me? And she says, how badly have you fucked up lately? Maybe you're next. And he says, I don't buy that. But he sort of gives her a look like he's not totally certain when he says that. He says, my team has been asked to participate in a mission that requires 6 people minimum to pull it off tonight. And when she says, so what, you want me to help you? You want my team to step in? He says the mission comes first, and she says the mission's canceled, McClaren. You just don't get it yet. So he's about to storm out of there, and she says, if you get a real lead, I will help you go after them, okay? I'll help you. But if I'm right and it's the director, then, and I hope I'm wrong. And he says, okay. So this is an interesting revelation, because like I, you know, have been ever since a couple episodes ago with this little kid thing, we're rescuing the Romanian kid. I have been like, okay, so who's the director, and how do we know that they're being honest about their intentions on anything? And how do we know that the assignments they're sending people on are for the betterment of humanity and to save people, and not to, you know, to ultimately do the opposite? There's no information on our end on what the director is really like or really after, besides what we're getting secondhand from travelers. And of course, people who put their lives in this person's hands are going to trust that person and are going to believe whatever they're being told. And we as viewers don't really have a reason to do that, except that we trust the traveler's judgment, which, I mean, I don't, not because I don't trust them as people and characters, but because historically it has been proven that we can mobilize millions of troops for lies many, many, many times throughout history, and just tell them whatever we want, and they will use the information that they have to determine if you're right and wrong. And that information is often information that you yourself control as you are telling them to go to war. So you can get them to believe whatever you want. And I don't know that the director isn't doing that right the fuck now. So at this point, I was kind of wondering if this wasn't a punishment for what Philip did with the kid, and basically a test to see how committed they were to continuing the missions they're being given versus going off and doing whatever the fuck they feel like doing, Philip especially, which is part of why him being carted away first got me a little worried. But then it doesn't appear that that's like necessarily relevant, so I don't know. So meanwhile, all of this is happening, and there is this adorable moment with fucking David, who is out here trying to figure out where Marcy is, and is he bought stuff to make 2 different dinners, and he's trying to decide which one to make, and he's calling her and leaving this long rambly message. And sincerely, he is so cute, you guys. And I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again. How nice it is for the show to have flipped the script and to have it, instead of it being a dude out here doing doodly action movie stuff with his long-suffering girlfriend who's so worried about him making dinner at home, which is like so usually the case. I love that they flipped it around and made it a dude. And, you know, he's still adorable and masculine and all of that, but he is playing a role here in the story that is traditionally a role for a woman character. And it's just endlessly delightful to me that they didn't go that way with it. So he finally finds McClaren's business card, the card that McClaren left when he was still McClaren, BT dubs. So our McClaren, the traveler, does not know what he's talking about when he's like, oh yeah, you used to put this under my door. But he goes and tracks him down and it's like, hey, I kind of know that you and Marcy are working together, and she did not come home last night, so I'm a little bit worried. And it turns out to be key that he did this, because they would not have been touching base earlier, like without him alerting McClaren to the fact that she hadn't come home. I don't know how long it would have taken if it was he might not have known something had happened until he showed up for the mission, and they were no-shows. So at this point, McClaren is like trying to keep this balance between like, I'm going to assure you that I don't know what you're talking about because I need to keep my cover, but also assure you that I'm taking this seriously because I do, like, somebody going missing is a serious thing. He's like trying to maintain this weird, like, plausible deniability thing. And David's really not buying it. David's not an idiot. Like, he's a softie, and he's like a little bit goofy, but he's not stupid. And he hangs around waiting to hear what the fuck is happening, because he like can see when he tells McClaren that she didn't show up. He can see the expression on McClaren's face, like that he has an immediate like, wait, she didn't? And he was thinking when he came here that McClaren would be like, oh, she's, doing something I can't tell you about, but she's okay. And was hoping against hope that's what he was going to get. And that is not what he gets. He gets somebody being like, wait, what? So McClaren, when he comes outside after realizing that nobody is responding to their comms, he says, if Marcy's face shows up practically anywhere there's a closed circuit TV camera, will know her location. David says, great, tell me how I can help. McClaren says, you can go home. And David says, oh my God, you're just like her. Would you stop? You know what? I'm going to help you out, whether you like it or not. How about that? And I love him saying this because he has no clue what he's like. He has no idea what he's saying. And McClaren says, what are you going to do? Follow me on your bike? And David says, aha, she did tell you about me. You gave it all away. I have a bike. And he says, David, your right pant leg is tucked into your sock. I was giving you the benefit of the doubt. And there's this long pause, and David looks down and says, all right, I get it. I'm not qualified, but just know this, Marcy's welfare is very important to me. And McClaren says, when I find her, I'll call her. Better yet, she'll just come home. And David's in the middle of like, if I don't hear from you by 5, when McClaren just fucking drives away and leaves him there. So yeah, that all is happening. And I just love David's being worried and interested and all of this. So Philip gets rolled away. He gets rolled back. There's not much description of what happened to him while he was gone, but he's just very relieved to find that he is not alone, that he wasn't the only one taken. And then we go to Carly, who is being rolled in front of a television. and the television has words instead of anybody. I thought she might be like facing off with the person on camera, but there's no person. It's just text. And they ask, who have you told? And she says, who have I told? What? I don't understand. And she starts getting really emotional. And I can't tell how much of this is Carly and how much of this is her pretending to be Carly. But I think it's her pretending to do what she thinks Carly would do in this situation. And I'm kind of here for this. Like, I really enjoy the idea that she's putting on a show of being near tears and worried about her son. Like, and don't get me wrong. I don't think that she's like, I don't really care about this baby. They can do whatever the fuck. But I know that his mother would care about the baby. Like, I think she does care. But I like to think that more of this is for show than not. They ask, do you know this person? And there's a shot of a dude in a baseball cap, and she doesn't react. She says, no, I've never seen him before. And I don't think that he's familiar to us. My guess is that he might be the person inside of McClaren right now. But I have no idea how someone from our time would get a hold of a photo from a person from the future. So I don't know. But yeah, she says, no, I've never seen him before. And then it switches to McClaren and she says no again. And then it goes to her husband. That's the father of my child. He's a police officer. So if I were you people, and then it switches back to, when are you from? And you can see that like shakes her. You know, whoever is asking her these questions is aware of what the fuck is going on here, at least to a degree. They ask her, what are the protocols? She says she has no idea what they're talking about. Who am I talking to? And then, what is your specialty? And she says, I just take care of my son all day. My specialty is mac and cheese. What is the name of your son? And she sort of sits up straighter here. Now, does she not know? Because I don't think that makes any sense. They're good at their jobs. It's not like she's not going to know her son's name. I think it's just that fact that they're asking about her son at all, that she's like, excuse me? And then we see on like film footage of somebody carrying a baby towards a camera and showing her the baby and asking if that's her son. And she says he's with his father today. And it seems as if she's suggesting this isn't actually her kid. But then she starts reacting in a way that's so desperate and sincere that I think when she says, don't you hurt him, if you harm that child, I will find you wherever or whenever you are and I will kill you. That feels really true to me. And she's like basically rolled back into her cage after this interaction. And there's no further question asked of her after, when are you from again? So then we have Carly. This one fucked me up real bad. So Carly is taken out of here, and asks the same thing. When are you from? And she is just, you know, the whole way that this goes down. There's a telephone ringing on the TV. She tells them that her name is Marcy Wharton. She says, I work at the library. I don't know why you've taken me here. I haven't done anything wrong. But then they show the phone ringing and we see David coming and answering the phone. And he's talking to Marcy as far as he seems to know. And it's just like, oh, Marcy, thank God. I was so worried. I've been freaking out. Has this whole conversation with her. No, I get it. Yeah, mum's the word. And no, of course, you're busy. Well, when you do, I'll be here. And yeah. We can have the chicken. And It's really sweet. This seems to be genuinely a thing that has happened. But he seems to totally believe that's her, that it's Marcy. I don't know how they did this. If it's just somebody imitating her voice, if this entire thing is somehow fabricated, I genuinely have no idea. I don't know if they I really don't. And they come back to her and say, does he know? And she says, know what? And begins to cry. And meanwhile, they have injected Philip with some shit. So first off, it was heroin because he was starting to DT and he was worried about it. So evidently these people know enough about him to be aware that he's an addict and is going to need a dose of this. But then they start to add something else. And Marcy's flipping out when she sees them adding a second dose because she thinks that this is more heroin and that they're going to send him into an overdose. Well, it turns out that is not what it is. It seems to be some kind of chemical that is meant to get him to talk. And he starts to sort of pass out, and they all seem really concerned that he's about to die because of an overdose. But gradually it becomes clear that that's not meant to be what happens here. So he keeps on sort of sitting up and being like, I'm still here. I'm still here. And Trevor says, tell us about your parents. Where do they live? And Carly says, you never talk about them. And asks what his mother's name is. And Philip says 2144. And the two of them look at each other, Carly and Trevor, and are like, fuck. Because he's not answering the right questions. He's lapsing into past shit that they're not supposed to be talking about right now. And he says, do you remember the taste of water recycled so many times it could never be made pure again? And Carly is telling him to shut up. And he says, the first one was heroin, and I'm more grateful for it than I care to admit. The second one was something else. Something I think would only work on someone who's been modified to be an historian. And he starts talking about how there are memories just pouring in. And he says, like the Helios tidal wave, I can't stop. I'm drowning in it. Which, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? It's like he's watching a movie inside of his head that he has no ability to turn off. Do you remember the taste of metal in the air? The stink of 20,000 souls crammed into a shelter designed for half that number? And Carly says, don't talk about the past. And he says, you mean the future. And she says, I mean stop talking. And he starts talking about Shelter 41. And apparently this collapsed and killed thousands of people at the stroke of 6. A bell rang and woke everyone up a split second before they died. And it always struck him as really deeply unfair. And all of them are sort of giving up on stopping him continuing. He has clearly hit on something that is emotionally resonating with them to such a degree that they don't even feel like fighting him and telling him to shut up anymore. So he gets grabbed and taken away as well. And so what happens next seems very real. So we have him, and he's being questioned and asked, what your mission is. And every time that he is asked a question, he responds with a quote that appears relevant to the question. And so my interpretation of what's happening here is that he is unable to not talk. He is unable to keep silent and simply not answer. So what he's doing is sort of redirecting his energy and his feeling of compulsion to respond into quotations instead of the actual truth of the real answer. He's getting around and finding a sort of loophole in this chemical and its effect on him. It's really something. Like, this is just, this whole idea is wild, and the way it's cut together. It is just, and his acting in this and the way that he's like stringing sentences together. The part where they ask him, how does the world end? And he says, this is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends, over and over and over again, and starts like collapsing into giggles. It feels so very much like somebody that's high, you know? I just really loved this whole sequence of how this all goes down. So they're continuing to ask these questions. I feel like, does Marcy get brought back when they take him away at this point? I feel like she's still gone when they come and get him, I'm pretty sure. So she's still being questioned throughout this scene in another room, I guess. Then they go and finally get Trevor. And Trevor, like, has a couple of really funny moments. At one point, he's like, we going up or down? As he's rolled onto an elevator. I'm guessing down. And then it rolls up and he's like, you son of a bitch, you got me. She's just so funny. So they're asking him, why are you here? And he's like, I was going to ask you the same thing. Like my humanities teacher, Mr. Wachowski, says, why are we all here? Right? What is your age? And he says, guess. And then it goes blank and comes back. He says, okay, technically I'll be 18 in October, but I'm kind of an old soul. What about you, Mr. Giant? When's your birthday? And he turns and looks at this dude who is just standing there, this guard that they have like encountered a couple times now. Those of you who read Dresden Files, you're going to know exactly what I mean when I say that this dude is Hendrix, like 100%, and he would be excellently cast if he were Hendrix. He just feels right to me. And he's trying to sort of have a conversation with him. But then he says something about him, the dude being a deaf mute, wouldn't be able to hear the quarterback call plays, would he? And when we cut to him being put back in his cage, he's being absolutely shoved, like thrown into his little cell in a way that everybody else wasn't handled. And it feels like somehow he really got under this dude's skin. And I really want to know more about that, because it feels like, I don't know. It feels like if anything, you'd be like, oh, this guy's kind of fun, even though he's annoying, you know, but this guy seems real mad about it. Meanwhile, Carly has been cut over the eye. And at one point she manages to like convince the guard to reach in and like wipe the blood out of her eye. But I'm not totally sure why he complied. That's the one, to me, real like weakness of the storyline in this episode, is the idea that this dude would give a shit that there's blood in her eye enough to put himself at risk and reach across her face, which is such a fucking amateur move. Like, we'll get to that, but yeah, I just didn't really feel like that rang true itself. So we go back to Carly and they ask, who is this? And they show her Philip sitting there. And we saw Philip get taken away. So there's no reason to not believe what we're seeing here. And they ask her when she's from, and she refuses to answer. And then we cut to Philip being shot in the chest. Now, guys, I almost jumped out of my fucking chair. I was watching this at my desk, and I almost hit the goddamn ceiling. I was not ready at all. At all, at all. And when she gets rolled back in and fucking Philip is still sitting there, I couldn't figure it out. Like, that looked 100% real to me. 1000% real. There was nothing about that looked fake. I couldn't understand it. And I still don't really know how they keep showing these scenarios Are they real? Are they film footage from a future? I don't know. But she flips out when she sees that and basically goes into a complete seizure. And at that point, the television switches off. And when Trevor is talking about this a little bit later, his theory is that they're pushing buttons and seeing what happens. So evidently, it's valuable to them to know that extreme stress could cause her to have a seizure. I don't know. I don't know what, like, I guess they're just finding pressure points. So we have McClaren, who's meeting up with the family team, and they're asking like where the hell his team is. And he explains them. We have to cancel the mission. He says they're MIA. And this woman says, what about all those people? And he says, I was hoping the director would send you a replacement team, but... And she says, maybe they're still away. And he says, forget it. The mission's canceled. The director will have to come up with an alternative, and we have to trust that. And she says, I'm sorry about your team. He says, I haven't given up just yet. But there is something about him being like, we just have to trust that they're going to come up with another way. I can't decide if that's like the wise course of action for somebody in his position or if that's hopelessly naive. I just really can't decide. It seems like it hasn't even, like, I don't know. I really don't. And with this team, like, being brought here specifically for this mission and then to not participate in it must be super frustrating. I wonder if they'll just try and do it themselves. So we go back to the cages, and I think it's Trevor who says there's no way they can do the mission without the personnel. All those people are going to die. And Philip says they already did. We just weren't there to prevent it from happening. Just hope the boss isn't in the same situation as we are somewhere. So I'm dying to know exactly what huge disaster they were planning to avert. I'm guessing it was something like a terrorist attack, but that's always where my mind goes with stuff like that. So who knows? Carly says, I have an opportunity to get us out of here if the opportunity presents itself again. And she says, but I need everybody to agree to it because we may not be better off. And Philip says, I say go for it. And Trevor asks how, and she says, you're going to try and talk me out of it because it's insane. And then the door opens, and they are rolling Carly back in, and she sees that Philip is fucking alive. And there's something about Philip's face when he realizes what she's saying. He seems pretty shook by it. And yeah, Philip is just like, Marcy, look at me. And she's like, you were in those clothes. You were slumped over. And she's flipping out still. And this is when Trevor's like kind of delighted. He seems to be figuring out, oh, they probably don't even have Carly's kid. Like, they're just trying to see what happens. So this dude, Mr. Giant, as Trevor keeps calling him, begins to roll Trevor out of there. And Marcy says, before you take him away, would you? And she's like holding out her face as best she can. And he gets, again, this like handkerchief and reaches in to wipe off her face. And this bitch sinks her teeth into his forearm. And because of the way this cage is built, he doesn't have any sort of leverage or any way to get her off him. She has sunk deep. Like, and listen, guys, I don't care how honorable it is. If I ever get in a fight, you bet your ass this is precisely what I'm going to fucking do. Biting is like my natural reaction to stress anyway. I clench my jaw, I grit my teeth. I will like just, that's how I get. And Owen, a couple of times, has found out to his detriment that if he goes on tickling me too long, he gonna get these teeth. That's how I'm gonna make him stop. because I can't talk and I don't have any strength when I'm being tickled, but I can fucking bite. You bet your ass. So when she clamps down on this guy's forearm, that's where that can kill you. And it does, because she doesn't let go. And guys, it is brutal to watch. It is really rough. Like, this dude is shaking her. She's in the chair, like bouncing back and forth, the blood pouring onto the floor because she has hit a fucking artery. Like, this dude was not prepared. And you can see Trevor watching, like, his face. He was so not ready at all. And I love the camera cuts away from her. Her fucking teeth are still in there. Like, she has not let go. She isn't going to let go until she knows that this man is unconscious and not going to be able to, like, get help. Meanwhile, McClaren is on his computer trying to, like, figure out where they are, looking at the web that is for travelers, like checking all of the signals that he's seeing and trying to detect something. And all of a sudden, it pops up on the screen, each of them, and it, like, they're all in their chairs with their, their saline bags and everything. And he's given coordinates of exactly where to go. So yeah, this is, for some reason, it's put up where he can see it. And I do not understand, because I don't think this is an accident. This is not like, you know, they are letting him have them back. And I don't know why. But he's being given the coordinates and he goes and finds them, and they are all slumped over. The guard is dead. And, like, they're slumped over in a way that I'm like, what happened to them? They look like they've all been gassed, or like, I don't know, but I have a hard time believing they all fell asleep. Like, what happened to cause them all to just, like, go unconscious, apparently? And he is able to unlock everything and get them in here. Like, fucking, Carly is on her side, because she collapsed into the bloody water. Like, that's awful. And she says, "You're late." There's still water pouring down here. Like, it's just really, it's so gross. And she says, "I had to end it." And he wants to know what he did this for. And she's like, "No, he was hired. We never found out who it actually was." And she asks him about the mission, and he says, "It was canceled. I couldn't do it without you. There was no way." And she says, maybe that's what this was all about. And that is the end of the episode. And it seems like he doesn't really know what to say to that when she says that. I don't know if that hadn't occurred to him yet or what. But yeah, guys, I'm so over time. But I don't understand why they let McClaren have them back. I don't get it. And I'm sure, you know, all will be revealed. But I just don't really understand why they were allowed to be, like, uplinked. I don't understand how they were all passed out. Unless it was just sheer exhaustion. I guess it might be. It's unclear just how much time has passed. The woman says that the guard's body is cold, so I'm guessing it had to have been at least, like, several hours. But yeah, I just have a lot of questions about this whole thing. So yeah, that was an intense episode, man. It really was. It was tough to watch. But yeah, thank you again so much to Karyn for commissioning this. I really appreciate it so much. I hope that you guys enjoyed the coverage, and I'm really looking forward to watching the next one. So guys, I will see you soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
was an Unspoiled Network podcast.